Now, EdTech Monday is a platform for EdTech entrepreneurs, education stakeholders, and government representatives to facilitate critical conversations on the use of technology for teaching and learning. And the show is an initiative of the MasterCard Foundation's Regional Center for Innovative Teaching and Learning in ICT, and is part of the foundation's strategy to find solutions to Africa's youth employment by closing the gap in access to quality education and advance the integration of technology in education policies and practices across Africa. Now remember that the MasterCard Foundation is helping bring you EdTech Monday. and has partnered with MEST Africa to bring you EdTech Monday, airing on the last Friday of every month. Now, EdTech Monday builds on the foundation's Young Africa Work strategy in Ghana, with the vision of harnessing opportunities to shape the future of work and to create an inclusive economy with enhanced resilience for young people and the most vulnerable, especially women, by 2030. My name is Nathan Kwao. I'm your moderator for the session. Now, today we are talking about EdTech, or talking on the topic EdTech as an enabler of education for learners living with disability. Now, the World Health Organization approximates that there are over 400 million children living in Africa, with about 10 to 15% of school-going age living with a disability. The World Bank report, in addition, states that less than 10% of all children with disabilities under the age of 14 attend school in Africa. Now, we do know that disability is one of the most serious barriers to education across the globe. Nevertheless, EdTech is proving to be an enabler to access to education for all, including learners with disabilities. So today we are going to talk about how EdTech can be used to increase access to education for learners with various disabilities. And I've been joined by some wonderful guests who really know the topic and will provide great insight to the issue. First, I have Rose Ofosuhima-Dakun, National Inclusive Education Coordinator at the Special Education Division, SPED, of the Ghana Education Service. Now, Madam Dakun is the, like I said, National Inclusive Education Coordinator, and she has a specialty in both education for the hearing impaired and inclusive education. And as a National IE Coordinator, she coordinates the National IE program at the national and sub-national sectors, and she liaises with international and local bodies to promote IE activities in Ghana and across the sub-region to support education for all. Madam Rose Ofosuhima-Dakun, if you can hear me, good morning. Welcome to EdTech Monday. Hello, Rose. Can you hear me?
Good morning. Happy to be your guest.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. My second guest is Derek Omari, CEO of Tech Era. Now, Derek is a social entrepreneur who builds accessible hardware and software products to bridge accessibility gaps in education and social inclusion for persons with disabilities. He's currently working as the national consultant for the United Nations on Disability, and he's a certified Google Chrome accessibility expert and appointed as the country rep to join the Global 40 Accessibility Experts member network of the Global Initiative for Inclusive ICTs. Derek, if you can hear me, good morning. Welcome to EdTech Monday.
Good morning. Thank you for coming.
Great. My final panelist is Farid Ibrahim Gombela. He's a digital skills trainer and professional social worker with the Social Welfare Department at the Krowa Municipal Assembly. Has a BA in Political Science and Philosophy from the University of Ghana and an MSc in Violence, Conflict and Development from the University of London. And as an individual living with visual impairments, Farid strongly appreciates the value of technology in enhancing the educational life of persons with disability, as he's also benefited from the same throughout his educational journey. Farid, if you can hear me, good morning. Welcome to EdTech Monday.
Recording in progress.
Good morning, Nathan. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you so much for joining us, and it's a pleasure having all of you on this edition of EdTech Monday. And we are live. If you don't know, we are live on City 97.3 FM's Facebook page, and we are live on MEST Africa's Facebook page as well. Let's begin. Now, I shared some stats earlier concerning children with disabilities. Rose and Derek, let me take your thoughts on the extent of inequities and unfulfilled rights of children with disabilities in Ghana, and what kind of educational facilities there are or are not available to support their education. Rose and Derek.
All right, I think maybe Madam Rose should start since she represents the government.
Thank you.
Okay.
I don't know which of us is going first.
Rose, you can go first.
Okay, thank you so much. I'm highly delighted to be part of your program. Yeah. We at the Ghana Education Service under the ministry. Hello?
We can hear
Okay.
you, Rose. Please go ahead. We can hear you.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm highly delighted to be part of this program. We at the Ghana Education Service and the Special Education Division, we are poised to see to it that children with disabilities in our country are trained, educated, so that they can live as independent human beings in their adulthood. So nothing will gladden our hearts to see all these children in schools. And provisions have been made by the government to provide education for all categories of children with disabilities. The only problem we have is that we do not have this information deep down into the last person in our society. And coupled with our misconception about disability and education and training, we sometimes, as a people, do not feel like letting our children be in school. Notwithstanding that, we in the government are working hard to support parents and families to educate these children. In our system currently, we have the one that we call segregated schools in place, which will soon phase out because of inclusive education. And we do have inclusive education also being implemented with a well-developed policy, a framework that directs us as to what we need to do in educating our children. So all this in place, we are looking forward for the society and families to bring the children to school. For now, I can confidently say that access to education by children with disability is very easy and open. All that we need to know is what is the condition that our child or our ward is in. Because for us now, currently, what we are practicing, even though we are doing inclusion, we looking at limited resources that we have. We do include or mainstream those within the mild to moderate. Those severe are currently still in the special schools. We have 28 special boarding schools across the country. We have 2 main schools for the visually impaired, one in the Upper West and one in the Eastern region. Then we have 4 integrated schools for the visually impaired. We also have 13 schools for the deaf across the country, basic schools, 1 secondary SHS for the deaf, only for the deaf. Then we have 1 integrated secondary school for the deaf. Then we have 12 schools for the intellectual and developmental disabilities. Aside this, all children, all categories, especially the physically challenged ones, can also be enrolled, and the mild to moderate visually and hearing impaired can also be enrolled in all basic schools, all category of schools across the country with support from the schools. So currently, this is the provisions we have to educate our children in terms of access to education. Thank you. I'll hold my brief now and wait for my turn later. Thank you so much.
All right, Rose, thank you so much. Derek, your take on this?
Yeah, Peter, thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you, Madam Rose, for providing that background on inclusive education in Ghana. I was very happy when you said that the Ministry of Education and GS is really working towards moving away from segregated education to inclusive education. And it sounds like everything seems to be in the right direction. But from my little experience in the space, we cannot ignore the fact that many children with disabilities are still out of school. I mean, the last time I engaged with the Inclusive Education Coordination Office, the former coordinator, she did a presentation and mentioned that about 88% of children with disabilities are still out of school. Maybe this is wrong, but the UN states that about 1 in 3 children in Ghana with disabilities are still out of school. And we, Tech Era, did our own little research and realized that out of all the mothers we spoke to, for every 5 children, 3 of them are out of school. Maybe the data I have is old, but I still appreciate and I recognize that the government has done a lot to, one, implement the inclusive education policy, but we should still be aware of the several challenges that persons with disabilities continue to face in school. Yes, there are great, they are piloting the inclusive education model, but currently blind students don't learn science and maths in senior high school and university, and you cannot ignore that, and that is severe. You know, and besides that, many parents who are mostly mothers of children with disabilities, because most of them are single parents, are struggling to be able to cater for their children or to even send them to school, because they have to now struggle to take their children to school because of inaccessible transport systems. Schools, mostly government schools, complain of the fact that they are not well resourced with equipped teachers to be able to support the children. I know of the Special Matters Inclusive Initiative, where they actually fund or support the Madrid demonstration school to have like a special class, you know. So the challenges are there. Yes, we've made progress, but in education, especially inclusive education, Ghana has a long way to go. And I just wanted to mention that.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much, Derek. Farid, let me bring you in. What has been your journey to access equitable education, and what are some of the key things you have learned, and what are some of the key things you will recommend to be incorporated into the educational system to enable learners with disability not only get access, but also improve on their skills and what they learn and how they learn in school?
Okay, thank you very much, Nathan. I hope you can hear me, please.
Yes, I can.
Okay, so well, my journey has been in multiple phases, I would say. As someone who grew up with a visual impairment in Ghana, my first introduction to education was really through Braille, the use of Braille. So in the early stages, I didn't have access to any kind of educational technology until I got to JHS, where I was introduced to the computer together with some of my colleagues. But strangely enough, we were only given a cursory introduction to the use of computers. We were not allowed to explore like other kids do, you know, in other parts of the world. And from there, I moved on to the senior high school, where it was a lot more tech-centered, but even then, we're still not using computers, you know, in our exams and, you know, interim assessments. Unlike in the University of Ghana, where it was more tech-focused, because students with visual impairment especially were encouraged to use more of the computer for our everyday assignments, our interim assessments and exams. And for me, in doing my master's in the UK, my tech background or my knowledge in using technology was very instrumental in helping me scale through, you know, some of the difficulties I encountered, especially with doing my own research, downloading my own books, you know, converting my own documents and stuff like that. So for me, one of the biggest lessons I would say is the fact that we should implement these, you know, EdTech policies from the very beginning. That for me has been the biggest challenge. Sometimes we might have the computers there, we might have some of the technologies available, we might even have an inclusive, you know, policy that sets out a step-by-step delivery of how things should be done. But if the people on the ground don't have the training to be able to teach persons with disability, and I'm not just focusing on the visually impaired, I'm also looking at the hearing impaired, the physically challenged, who also have issues with physical access to, you know, some of these classrooms and some of these IT centers. That creates a problem that becomes counteractive. We can't pursue an inclusive, policy without thinking about one, physical access, and again, how the technology itself is accessible. We have a number of, IT labs in our schools across the country. But how many of these schools have the simple screen reader softwares for persons with visual impairment who may want to attend these schools? How many of these teachers in the schools are trained to be able to accommodate persons with different forms of disabilities to be able to teach them? And I like it when Madam Rose said that we are moving away from the segregated system to a more inclusive society where, as a visually impaired living in Accra, I don't have to travel all the way to the eastern region or the northern region just to access education. So for me, this has been my experience, and I feel that if we are implementing these policies from the very beginning, if you introduce kids to technology and allow them to fully explore the various technologies available, kids with disability and persons with disability in general would be the better for it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Interesting thoughts there. Rose, let me bring you back in. What more do you think can be done to ensure that children with disabilities are more included when we are building equitable and more inclusive societies? And what else can be done to ensure that these children with disabilities have access to lives they deem as dignified and fulfilling? Hello, Rose, can you hear me? Hello, Rose, can you hear me? All right, I think Rose has an issue with her line. We'll get to her in a bit. Derek, if you can hear me, let's talk about EdTech.
Oh, hello.
Yes, Rose, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Yes.
Yes.
A quick one before I come to your question. Yeah, Derek mentioned that special mothers created a special class in Medina School. That is not correct. The Medina School is one of our 23 unit schools that before we started inclusion, we were looking at options to see how best we can get a lot of children being mainstream in the schools close by at a convenient way. And so we have 23 unit school for the intellectual and developmental disabilities across the country. And Medina cluster of school is one of them. So they already have that. That school has been there for a long time. So they only take children with intellectual and developmental disabilities, those categories. And these children are schooled there. They socialize with the other counterparts, the regular counterparts, and they play with them, but they have special class where they are given special attention. Thank you.
Great.
Thank you so much. I think we are all in the same boat, going to the same destination. We will all be happy if we have technology being used by children with disability. Why am I saying that? For instance, if you take the visually impaired, as Farid rightly said, if they are using technology, learning will be very, very easy for them. Currently, if you go to Kwapimai, they do not write WASI with Braille.
Okay.
They write WASI with computers.
And
we are looking forward, working hard to see to how the other 5 integrated schools, SHS, will be able to use computers to write WASI. That makes it very easy for WAEC and even those who are marking. And that is very excellent if we are using that. And so we are looking at how best we can get softwares for the schools, how best we can get the teachers who are training them, especially at the basic level. At the basic level, we have a lot of children being turned out into SHS. If we catch them young, they will be able to use it and that will also improve the academic outcomes. And so that is what we are looking forward. And that is the message we are always giving to partners who want to help us. Currently, because of inclusion, we have a lot of children with cerebral palsy benefiting from education in our various inclusive settings. And we go to most of our regular schools, you'll find these children there. Sadly, some of these children, teachers don't even understand or know that these children, if they cannot grasp pencil or pen, they can use computers to write. If one finger is trained or prepared for that. So we are pushing forward to get them using laptops, tablets, to as their book right from KG to wherever they want. As I speak now, we've been able to secure some of these laptops and tablets to be distributed to these children in our schools across the country.
Okay.
Because if they have that, they will be able to write without using pen and paper. And I'm happy to tell you, the general public, that WAEC is ready to support these children to use computers to write WASI and BECE. And we have started doing that. So technology is what we need to direct all our attention to if we really want to. And we are working, we in the Ministry and Ghana Education Service are working hard to get all these children doing that. There was this issue of most of the children are not in school, they are at home. And I want to use this, your platform, to inform everybody. If you are a family member, if you are a family with a child with disability, no matter the condition, please, your first thing is to get the medical report to know what actually the condition is and the degree of that condition. And you can go to any of our district directorates, regional directorate, or even at headquarters. If you come with your medical report, we are happy to help you and to direct you and give you the needed guidance so that that child will be enrolled in school. So we want everybody to support us in that direction so that we'll be able to get all these children in school. Because if they are in school, they will learn to live independently. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rose. Derek, I was asking, I wanted to ask you about the role EdTech plays in all of this and what some of the EdTech interventions have done, especially the ones that have been successfully implemented in Ghana and in Africa. What are some of those interventions and what can be done to increase the scale of these interventions so they can do far more than they are currently doing at the moment?
All right, thank you so much, Nathan. Let me kind of define what EdTech is in the context of inclusive education.
Okay.
A lot of times when we think about EdTech, we think that computers, but in the area of inclusive education, where we focus on ensuring that all learners with various disabilities can be able to have access to quality education, EdTech can be grouped into three categories of technologies. The first one is assistive technology. Assistive technologies are basically technologies that are explicitly designed to improve learning for students with disabilities and can allow them to communicate more effectively and participate in the learning activities. There are students who can never really learn in classrooms without assistive technology. For example, imagine all our books, which currently is, most of the books in these inclusive schools or even in our subjects are printed. And because of that, without Braille devices and without Braille copies of these textbooks that are crucial in learning, blind persons can never be able to access the information. And so I know that in some of the schools like Coupon, there are some Braille devices that are able to convert books, printed books into Braille so that blind persons can be able to have access. And also if the books are not digital, blind persons will not be able to have access. But using assistive technology like screen readers and also speech to text, persons who are blind, persons who are deaf and sometimes even assistive technologies like the AAC, which is the alternative and augmentative communication tool. Persons who are deaf, persons with autism, persons who are blind can be able to learn effectively. The other type of other type of EdTech is the accessible technology. Accessible technology basically means that technologies that are not necessarily designed for persons with disabilities, but can help persons with disabilities access information that will not be accessible. And some of these technologies come with like inbuilt support for persons with disabilities. And so in designing educational solutions, we have to always think about how can we ensure that the educational solution you have designed is accessible. Once we say something is accessible, for example, the font is accessible, the font is not too small, the colors, the contrast is high, it's not low contrast, so that someone with maybe someone who is low vision or someone who has arthritis cannot be able to access the technology, right? And then the third one is the general purpose technology, which is mostly what we talk about. So a lot of times Ghana just focuses on how do we provide the general purpose technologies, provide the laptops, provide the computers, but we don't really think about what softwares are on these machines and laptops and computers and how are they accessible to the children. And also what assistive technology tools should we provide? For example, talking calculators are crucial to help blind persons learn maths. Recently, my organization supervised the development of Braille geometry to help blind students in junior high school to be able to follow classroom learning and learning maths. Imagine a blind person using drawing like geometry, shapes and things. It's totally impossible. Currently, there's nothing like that. And we designed that solution. I mean, we have also designed solutions that help hearing impaired persons to be able to receive instruction via captions, because sign language interpreters are very expensive, and the GS cannot provide sign language interpreters in all inclusive classrooms. It's totally impossible. And we have developed learning management software that when the students have in their classroom, anything the teacher says, they can read it on their computers. We have also developed learning management software for blind persons which can help them prepare adequately for WASI, because currently blind students, for them to prepare for WASI, usually most of us prepare for WASI using past questions. But for blind students, their colleagues have to read to them. And will you always have your colleagues be with you, sit by you, and read through the past questions? We have designed a very accessible platform that helps these learners to be critically prepared for WASI and other things. I mean, there are so many technologies, but there are several challenges that has prevented the scale of these technologies. Currently, I can confidently say that in Ghana, what we are mostly used to is setting up ICT labs. Like Farid said, we have not mainstreamed ICT, digital technology, in the classrooms. And so aside from students going to ICT labs to learn, it's like they do not use it in their daily learning, and that is a big barrier. Okay. And besides that, there is very, very little investment in the space for the development of EdTech. You know, there is no policy on who is supposed to source EdTech for children with disabilities. There is no clear guidelines there. And so these make it very, very challenging to be able to, and even if you come up with a solution, to even scale it across the schools. And so these are some of the challenges we currently face in Ghana and across Africa.
Thank you so much. Derek, stay with me. Rose, I'll bring you in. I want the two of you to talk to me in a minute or so about policy and what policies are in place to ensure EdTech innovations support equitable learning solutions for learners with disability. So maybe Derek, you can answer your part, and then Rose can answer hers. Let's try and you know, in a minute, just give us your
I think policy is crucial. I mean, when we look at the UNCRPD Article 24, it talks about the fact that all learners should be able to have access to inclusive education, and we cannot ignore that technology as a key role. I mean, we've seen different countries like Rwanda implement the ICT in education policy that ensures that when we talk about ICT, no one is left behind. When we talk about ICT, it is part of the learning, right? And I think we have a long way to go. So I myself, I'm eager to hear whether the Ministry of Education or the GS has a clear policy on how ICT should be deployed, especially to children with disabilities. And so I'm looking forward to what Madam Rose has to say on that.
Rose, yes.
Okay, thank you, Derek. And thank you for your brilliant ideas. And I think we when we work together, we'll be able to achieve all. But for a policy direction, if you look at our 2015 inclusive education policy, we made provision for assistive technology, assistive devices being used by children, but it was not that loud. The policy that we are reviewing now, currently, the review one has made provision for assistive technology. All the things that Derek was mentioning are all in our plans so that we can support that. So the revised version of the policy will come out with that in that policy, it is loud and clear that we really need assistive technology to support our children education. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Farid, let me bring you back in. Is there a need for more policy interventions to enable learners with disability, or is it a challenge with implementation?
Okay, Nathan, I think it's more of a challenge. Well, so it's an expansion of the scope in the policies that we have. And I'm glad to hear that Madam Rose tell us that they are doing a review of the inclusive education policy, because like she said, the focus on ICT and accessibility was not intense. It was just limited. The policy was more generalized. So it would be great if a revised policy would place a lot more focus on how we can mainstream technology right from the very beginning. So for me, it's more of expanding the scope of the existing policies and implementing it. The policy, even as it exists now, had a 4 to 5 year implementation or roadmap. I'm curious to know how much of that roadmap has been achieved, because it had a year-on-year, deliverables or things that needed to be done to ensure that by 2019, 2020, we had gotten somewhere. But unfortunately, we still see a lot of the problems in terms of physical access, in terms of materials, availability of materials, resources, in terms of even software, on some of the computers and other devices provided. In fact, some of the devices that we have are just, sitting, I've been turned into white elephants because we don't have enough of them to be able to give, students with disability the opportunity to really learn these devices. And I'm talking about, for example, the Braille display, the Pearl camera, and some of these other technologies that places like the University of Ghana have been able to procure through, private support, but are not able to fully implement because they are not enough. If you don't handle the few you have, it might cause a lot of problems. So I'm thinking that the policy should be a lot more expansive and should delve more into the benefits or the impact of IT on learning with, learners with disability. Thank you.
All right, just stay with me. Let's quickly tell us your experience in using EdTech for learning and whether or not it made it easier or tougher in a few words.
It definitely made it easier, Nathan. It definitely made it easier because, like I said, and the technologies that we have available have made it possible for me as a visually impaired student to be able to go online, do my own research, access my own information, download my books, especially during my master's in the UK. Because there I had the library support and all of that, but to be able to keep within the time and within the constraints of my program, I had to do my research on my own. And if I didn't have the basic IT skills, it would have been difficult. And nowadays we have technologies. One of my most exciting moments is to be able to get even a hard copy text, let's say a book which is hard copy, and I use my phone through a software called the Scene AI or the Kibo on, Scene AI on Apple devices and Kibo on Android devices to be able to read hard copy text. It scans the page and reads it for me. So it makes, definitely technology has made things a lot more easier for, visually impaired individuals. But the question is, how many people have that opportunity to be able to use these technologies? And I'm sad to say that some of my friends are a bit reluctant to fully migrate towards, using technology because they haven't used it from the beginning. And there's always that fear that if I use, these technologies, how is it going to affect my academic performance? Because I'm used to my old ways, which is the Braille. So that is also a challenge. And the other challenge I would say is some of these softwares, because they are also licensed softwares like the JAWS, institutions need to purchase them to make it easier for the students or, in that institution to use them. So for me, if we are able to put some of these things in place, definitely it has benefited me, and I'm sure it will benefit a lot more people. Thank you.
Right. Thank you so much. Your thoughts on the role EdTech can play in enabling learners with disabilities to overcome barriers to accessing education?
I thank you, Nathan. I think that EdTech plays a critical role, especially in today's time, especially when even COVID came in. A lot of children with disabilities face several challenges because they cannot be in classrooms. So how do these children learn? One, I want to talk about 3 main points. One, EdTech ensures that children can learn on their own. It facilitates self-led learning. Why? Because the goal is to ensure that these children are independent and reduce the external support that they will have. And the only way to do that is using EdTech. And I can give you an example. For example, in Tunisia, children with dyslexia improve their reading, writing, and comprehension skills by themselves using a mobile app and tactile letters. And using this, they can study on their own. And so if we ever face a situation like COVID, children with disabilities can just go on a mobile app and then have some tactile letters that they can use to learn how to read, learn how to write, learn basic comprehension. And so EdTech is very crucial. The second thing is EdTech improves instruction in schools. There are so many barriers to teaching and learning in our classrooms that only EdTech can be able to reduce. For example, how does a hearing impaired in an inclusive class follow the clear instruction of a teacher who does not understand sign language, without having to incur an additional cost to have sign language in the class? The only way is to use a computer that has a speech text so that the students can be able to follow the reading. And sometimes even students can remotely join classrooms through EdTech and do not have to be present in the class because there are so many societal barriers like transportation, like building. There are so many schools that are still having issues with physical accessibility. And the only way to cross that bridge is through EdTech. And the last thing I want to talk about is EdTech has the power to improve the behavior of students. And and in education, you're not only looking at the academic progress, but you're also looking at the personal improvement, the personal professional progress of the student. And there are cases where EdTech has been used, like in schools, and I think in Iran, EdTech has been used to improve the hygiene, health of hard of hearing students through educational videos. And specific deaf animation. So we create animated videos in a way that deaf students can be able to follow. And I want to just imagine during the COVID-19, one thing that really struck me was how the society never really looked at the accessibility of the information that we pass across. So because of that, there were so many persons with disabilities who had no idea that we were in crisis. COVID-19 had happened and they had to take certain measures to protect themselves. And because of that, persons with disabilities were more open to getting COVID than anyone else. So how do we think about more accessible ways? And EdTech is the only way that we can create more accessible content and be able to educate our students in schools. So these are the 3 key points. I mean, there are several other benefits.
Okay, Derek, thank you so much. If you just tuned in, you're listening to the November edition of EdTech Monday on the City 97.3 FM's Facebook page and on MEST Africa's Facebook page. This month, we are talking about EdTech as an enabler of education for learners living with disabilities. And I've been speaking to Rose Ofosuhima Dako, National Inclusive Education Coordinator at the Special Education Division of the Ghana Education Service. I also have Derek Omari, CEO of Tech Era, and I have Farid Ibrahim Gombela. He's a digital skills trainer and professional social worker with the Social Welfare Department at the Krowo Municipal Assembly. All right, let's get to the final bits of our conversation. Derek, let's talk about systemic changes that need to take place so that EdTech for learners with disabilities can be effective, sustainable, and can achieve positive educational outcomes.
Thank you, Nathan. This is a very important question. And earlier we were talking about what policies does the government have to ensure that EdTech is a key factor in education. for a systemic change that can really make a dent in the education of children with disabilities, we need to have a clear strategy and national guideline on how do we source EdTech in schools? How do we develop EdTech? Because we don't always have to get a foreign technology. The problems that students with disabilities face in Ghana are very, very are unique. And so we need to be able to develop local solutions for the students in the classroom because of how we teach students in schools here. And more importantly, how do we scale EdTech so that every child, every student, no matter the disability, can have technology to be able to overcome the several barriers that they face. And this is a very important strategy and guideline that we need to develop. Secondly, we need to make innovation in Ghana easy. There are so many innovators. I mean, with my organization, Tech Era, we have trained over 15 assistive technology innovators, and we have come up with several innovations that are sitting on the shelf because it's very expensive to be able to innovate in Ghana. For you to import parts, especially when you are doing hardware innovation, it takes a very long time, 3 to 4 years to be able to innovate. I mean, we have created braille calculators, we have created pencil holders, we have created braille geometry, many other innovations that are still sitting on the shelf because it's just very expensive to scale. And also, unfortunately, the beneficiaries usually cannot pay. Persons with disabilities are one of the most vulnerable, or the UN states that they are one of the most marginalized or the poorest of poorest in our communities. And most of the times, they cannot pay for the services, they cannot pay for the products. And so how do you get an investor to think long-term investment, think long-term sustainable financing? And so the government needs to create an enabling environment to, one, foster innovation of education technology for persons with disabilities by creating some form of like maybe exemptions for local innovators who are focusing on this area, or attracting investors to think long-term and giving them very, very favorable benefits so that they can be able to stay up innovation in the space. And I think the last thing is we need to really move away from the charity model of disability to thinking more about the social model of disability. What do I mean by this? A lot of times when we think about disability as private sector, as organizations, we only think about giving, about sympathy, about sharing food and sharing money. But we really need to move from there and think about how do we create a society that is enabling? How do we create a society that is accessible? By investing the charity, the money and the resources we would have just given in a short time into important investment in education technology, important investment in building infrastructure, building the technology, the resource, the research, so that we can be able to build long-term solutions that can change the lives of persons with disabilities. Imagine Farid didn't have access to education, technology. Imagine not being able to use technology in school. How would he have even applied for his master's in the UK? And there are so many children, not only blind, not only deaf. There are many children with intellectual disabilities, many children with cerebral palsy, autism, Down syndrome, who still don't know what to do because the teachers see them as a barrier because there is no technology that can be able to facilitate learning. And so we really need to think about reframing how we approach disability. And lastly, we need to implement what I call the Accessibility Act. Currently, a lot of the news sites, a lot of the information centers, a lot of websites that we have in Ghana, about 95% of them are not accessible. And so if there is important information for a student with disability to be able to learn, even if they have the braille or they have a laptop with a speech software and they go on there, they simply can't use it because their websites are not accessible. And so the government needs to be able to implement a policy that ensures that all government websites, all key public service websites, like the media, is accessible because information is crucial for learning. And so if a student cannot access information, that is problematic. And so these are key systematic changes that I believe that needs to take place to be able to move EdTech in our space forward.
All right, Derek, thank you so much. Farid, let me ask you what you think needs to be done going forward to ensure that EdTech facilities, EdTech makes access easier to quality education for learners with disability.
Hi, can you hear me?
Hello, can you hear me, Farid? Hello, Farid, can you hear me? Okay, we'll try and see if we can get Farid's line. Rose, let me bring you in if you can hear me. Talk to me about the skills, knowledge, and the capacities that need to be developed and sustained for the successful adoption and implementation of EdTech for learning. Yes, Farid, you are back on. Can you hear me?
Yes. Okay. Yeah, I can hear you now.
Wonderful. So, I just wanted to find out what you thought had to be done going forward to ensure that there's easy access to EdTech facilities for learners with disabilities.
I think Derek has largely touched on a lot of those, initiatives or broad government policies that need to be done. I think that, chief among them, one thing I would say is that we need to encourage more students with disability to, take IT seriously. It needs to be a national policy, just even beyond learners with disability, so that learners with disability themselves can also feed into that atmosphere of EdTech. I think another thing to do is to create the avenue for people to be able to create some of these technologies locally. Derek's organization, for example, Tech Era, is doing amazing in that field. And there is also the Inclusive Tech Group, which creates a platform for individuals to collaborate with persons with disability to develop disability-related technologies. And that coincidentally is happening this week from tomorrow. So I feel that with initiatives like this that are centered on ensuring that persons with disability have access to the technology and are involved in the process of creating these technologies, it will help us feel a lot more included. I think the other thing to note is that the policies that are developed should be communicated. We have a nice policy that might touch on some of these EdTech related initiatives, but how many persons with disability are even aware of these opportunities? That for me is one of the biggest problems in this country. We might have some of these solutions available, but they are not communicated for people to fully understand them. So I feel that if these things are done, it would create a better platform for persons with disability to access EdTech related facilities. Thank you.
Right. Thank you so much. Rose, let's talk about the skills, knowledge, and capacities that need to be developed and sustained for a successful adoption and implementation of EdTech for learners with disabilities.
Thank you, Nathan. I am also very happy to hear from Derek and Farid, especially Derek, on what they are doing to promote EdTech. You know that in the school, for a child to be educated is the teacher. The teacher is key. And so if the teacher's capacity is not built, the teacher will not be able to get the information and the skills down to the child. So we need to train teachers, build their capacity in technology, and especially those that are suitable for inclusive settings, so that we can support all our children. Secondly, we also need to get the information and the knowledge that we will need concerning technology and its usage and its application. So we need skills, we need knowledge, and we need to, and because we are practicing inclusion, no teacher should be left out. We need to do all. We need to equip all of them, their skills. We also need to have these technologies available. If they are not available, they are not accessible, it's difficult to come by, then we will not get where we want to. All the brilliant ideas that we are talking about this morning, if we visit all our acts, our policies, and they are all written nicely designed, but people do not know. And we need to also use all platforms to educate, to let people know. Not only one person or only one institution, everybody should. Inclusion is for everybody. and we need everybody on board. But we need to take critical look at our teachers, what we can do to support teachers so that the song we are singing, they will also be able to sing along with us. Other than that, we'll have all brilliant ideas and everything there, but we will not be able to achieve what we are looking forward for. Thank you.
Rose, thank you so much. Just hold on. The question has come through and it's directed to you. Somebody, so a message says, anytime you engage the GES, they say the same old story in terms of inclusive education. They can't do a lot about it with the nature of the classrooms and the class size in basic 1 to JHS, even in SHS. So the person wants to find out what it is that GES is doing, looking at the current climate, classroom size, infrastructure, that kind of challenge. So how do we marry the two, the gap between putting the policy on paper and implementing it on the ground for people to benefit?
Thank you. You see, sometimes when I hear that, then it seems like people do not want to appreciate the work that is being done. You see, we had an intervention to support children in the classrooms, and the intervention was not working well. And so we decided to take a research to find out why the intervention was not working. And so we decided to pick schools in remote areas, schools with large class size, so that the argument that is coming on, large class size, remote, this and that. What? Because the intervention is on inclusive pedagogy. How do we use the inclusive pedagogy to help teachers, to support teachers in the classroom so that children with disability, children struggling to learn will benefit? And when we pick these schools, very deprived areas with large class size, and after we have trained the teachers and we have given them the needed coaching, mentoring, and supervision, come and see. The teachers and the children were doing marvelously well. Even the classroom orientation, when we, after training them, when they went back to their classroom and they used the classroom orientation to orient their class, we visited them and we had it in West Gonja and Adan West. When we visited them, then one of the teachers said, "Oh, I taught my class, the children were many. But after doing this orientation in my class, I could not see the numbers in my class." Which means that it is a skill. Just going to the classroom to teach is not enough, but we need to go beyond that before our schools will be able to work with. Okay. And so during that period of piloting and intervention, using that intervention, that inclusive pedagogy, the teachers, the schools involved realized that the numbers was not a problem. Okay. The problem was with how to manage the classroom. And classroom management is a skill that we need to have so that we'll be able to do that. Okay. Because you go to a school in some areas and they have only 15 children in the classroom, yet the children are not being able to learn. Okay. Because the appropriate pedagogy is not being enforced. Even there, they don't even have a child with disability. But ironically, we always look at those with physical conspicuous condition. But I tell you, most of the children in our classrooms are all special needs. Okay, all right. They need support. All right. So please, it is not about that. There is more to it than just providing the materials in the classroom. That's why I am hammering on it, that the teacher is key. If his capacity and skills and orientation, because we need to also orient ourselves to have a change of attitude towards certain things. Other than that, what that we are saying.
Rose, thank you so much. Great points. That was Rose Ofosuhima Daku, National Inclusive Education Coordinator at the Special Education Division of the Ghana Education Service. I also had Derek Omari, CEO of Tech Era, and I had Farid Ibrahim Gombela, He's a digital skills trainer and professional social worker with the Social Welfare Department at the Krowa Municipal Assembly. They joined me on the November edition of EdTech Monday. And this month, we're talking about EdTech as an enabler of education for learners living with disabilities. Remember that EdTech Monday is a platform for EdTech entrepreneurs, education stakeholders, and government representatives to facilitate critical conversations on the use of technology for teaching and learning. My name is Nathan Kwa. I brought you the session. Many thanks for listening. If you watched via City FM's Facebook page, wonderful. If you watched via MEST Africa's Facebook page, wonderful. We'll be back with another session. Be on the lookout for that. All right, let's get into the city news at